Well, Harry Hamlin, we've been enjoying you this season on Mad Men playing Jim Cutler. Now, we had heard of Jim Cutler in the past, but we'd never seen him before this season. What's your take on this guy? Who do you think he is?
That's a very interesting question. I've been asked that question before, and it's a question that I cannot answer, at least explicitly. He is an enigma to me. I think he's sort of an enigma to the writers as well, and we're evolving him as we go. Uh, I think a couple of things are evident, and that is he's kind of a power monger. He's sort of I think he's a man who likes to be in control. Um, and now that he's merged these two entities together, he's trying to figure out where his control buttons are, because there are other people who want the same control buttons. So there's a little bit of a clash going on between Cutler and I think Slattery's character as well, between Cutler and Roger.
Roger, he's basically the Roger of his old firm, right? They're similar job titles.
Well, I was described by Liz, and when I was first introduced, I was described as Roger with bad breath. So there's got to be some correlation between me and Roger.
Other than what we've seen actually on screen, did the writers or the producers give you any kind of backstory, any kind of background?
Well, I talked to Matt Weiner about it when he first hired me. I asked him, who is this guy? Because there were only a few words on the page. Um, and when I took the role on, I had no idea who he was. I didn't even know his name when I took the role on. They wouldn't give me any pages or any script. They asked me to do the part on faith. They said it was going to be one day on Mad Men. And I said, one day on Mad Men, okay, well, it's a great show, and I'm not doing anything that day, so I'll take a risk and I'll do one day on Mad Men, why not? And then it just began to grow from there. And I'm not sure, they told me when I first was hired, and it wasn't Matt Weiner that I talked to, but it was my agent, and my agent had talked to their business affairs office, who said, it's going to be one day for Harry, and it might be two, but probably one. If he's okay with that, we'd love to have him come in. And I then asked, well, who is it that I'm playing? And they said, we can't tell you. And I said, well, but I've never done that before. I've never gone in and worked on anything before where I didn't know, who the character was. And they said, well, that's the way we work here. And I just took it on faith and went in and did my one day. And that's when I was told that I was Roger with bad breath. So that's all I knew after the first episode. And as we've gone along, I've realized that Cutler actually has a deep background that may be revealed more. Certainly, each episode I find out more about him. I found out that he's a pilot, I think, or he's yeah, I think he said he was a pilot in one episode, and I was in. That means I was probably in the service, and I may have been in the Korean War. I might have. Who knows what I did? I mean, I don't know yet. I don't think they know yet.
Well, one thing that happened obviously was the merger of these two firms. That happened between Ted and Don. We never got to see a scene. I would have loved to have seen a scene where Ted comes back and tells Jim that they're merging. I think that would have been a very interesting conversation, because I don't think Jim was probably on board with that right away.
Well, the only clue I have about that is that when I went to Chevy, when we went out there, I said to them, if this doesn't work, I just want you to know I'm against it. Uh, Talking about the merger and whether it would be successful or not. And that's the only clue that I have about how Jim Cutler felt about it.
Couple of big moments for you this season. One was the episode where you bring the doctor in and everybody's running around the office all day. Was that a fun episode to shoot?
It was a fun episode, and ironically, that doctor in real life was a doctor named Dr. Max Jacobson, and he was a real historical figure back in the 60s. Kennedy became, I don't know if addicted is the right word, but used that drug on a regular basis. And my father also used that drug on a regular basis throughout the 60s, my father and mother, because my father was in the space program, and Kennedy, in his famous speech, said that we were going to put a man on the moon within 10 years. So he then, somehow got the government to distribute this drug to everybody in the space program, or at least to my father. And my dad ended up shooting himself up with that drug every day of his life for at least 10 years. And as a result, was able to do probably twice the work that he normally would have done, but I think it probably shortened his life by 10 years as well. But anyway, the ironic thing is that I was the one who introduced that drug in the firm on this TV show in 2012 or 2013, and here I am, also a guy who used this. I didn't use it myself, but I administered it to my parents when I was a kid.
So
So
you knew more than most people would about that.
I think I knew more than anybody on the set, in fact.
And then the other episode I wanted to ask you about, the one that they've got you on the Emmy ballot with this particular episode under drama guest actor, hoping to get in there, is The Tale of Two Cities, where Don and Roger have gone off to California, and Jim decides, hey, it's time to take over this place. Let's kick some people out.
Uh-huh. So that's the one that they put up.
That's the one they put up for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I think that's the one where his need for control and his power mongering comes out the most. Because I kind of take advantage of the fact that they're out of town, and I think there was a coup, was there not? I mean, it was just a kind of coup took place. I'm gone. Yes. So there you go.
We had Matt Weiner on with us last week, and your name came up a couple of times. I want to tell you what we were talking about, see what you have to say. He said one of his favorite all-time shows was L.A. Law. He just loved the writing and the structure and the fact that it took chances. Tell me about this on L.A. Law in terms of what he was talking about. He said a scene like where Rosalind goes down the elevator shaft, such a surprising, shocking scene, could never happen today on a broadcast show. Would you agree with something like that?
I think that there was no question that David D. Kelly and Stephen Bochco as a team wanted to push the envelope in network television, and that was part of their main agenda. There probably was a post-it on the wall that said "push harder," and every day they went into the writing room that they saw that. I think that Rosalind going down the elevator shaft moment was a water cooler moment that was well orchestrated by them, because that show was on Thursday night, as you recall, at 10 o'clock, which was at that time the prime time for a TV show. And one of the things that was strategic about 10 o'clock on Thursday night was that Friday morning was a big water cooler moment. People getting ready for the weekend, people having worked all week, they were taking a little less time, concentrating a little less on their work and spending a little more time talking about what was coming up for the weekend and perhaps what they'd seen on TV. And they knew that. And so L.A. Law, I think, was experiencing somewhat of a dip in the ratings at that moment, and they needed to do something that would get people huddled around the water cooler, and it worked. The next day, there wasn't social media in those days. There wasn't the ability to have this digital water cooler that we have now, but it worked in the sense that everybody in all the offices, and particularly all the law offices around the country, were all talking about the fact that they better look twice before they step into the elevator from now on. And it was a very cool moment for L.A. Law. It was not a very cool moment for her. I remember being in the makeup trailer when the scripts were distributed to us, and we were all reading the scripts, and suddenly there was a scream from the other end of the makeup trailer as she got to that part where she was being killed off, and she found out by reading the script.
Well, the other thing about it being a water cooler moment, a water cooler show, is you didn't have a way. I mean, you could record, I guess, on VHS, but certainly no DVRs, no watching it later on online. So if you did get to the office the next day and you didn't watch a particular show and everybody's talking about it, you completely felt left out.
It was a different era entirely. This was before cell phones were ubiquitous, and certainly before the digital age. So Yeah, I mean, people had to watch, or they weren't part of the loop. They weren't in the loop. Um, it's a whole different story now.
The other thing Matt was talking about in your particular case was over the course of Mad Men, he has very rarely cast, he said, guest stars that have any kind of a relationship with the audience already. He didn't like that baggage that they bring from other roles. He said, but he made an exception in your case just because he felt like you were just the perfect fit for this character.
Well, I'm certainly glad that he did, because and when they called me from Mad Men, I knew that. I knew that they didn't hire people with profiles. And I always had felt that Mad Men would be one show that I would never end up on for that very reason, because I do have a profile and I do come with significant baggage, because mainly I've always chosen to do projects based upon whether or not I thought they would be fun or challenging in the moment, and not strategic. I haven't made strategic choices that one might make if one wanted to further one's career based upon one's like long-term choices. I've done things that where I'd had to fire my agent because they said, if you do that, I won't be able to work with you anymore. And I said, well, I feel like doing it. I'm going to do it anyway, so get used to it. And they said, well, if you're going to do it, see you later. So I had to fire them. Particularly that was for Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, okay.
It was something that I really wanted to do, to have that experience in my life. And you only get an opportunity like that once in a while to have that kind of an experience. And I thought, well, I'm not going to pass this up just because somebody might think I'm an idiot because I did a dancing show. I don't care about that stuff.
Well, another role you've had this past season was on Shameless. Nothing at all. Lloyd is nothing at all like Jim Cutler. Tell us about that particular character.
Well, that guy is fun. And so is Jim Cutler, by the way. But when they came to me about Jim Cutler on Mad Men, and they said, we can't tell you who he is, I said, well, here's the thing. I'll do it. I'll come in for this one day, but my caveat is he cannot be a gay pedophile. If as long as Jim Cutler doesn't turn out to be a gay pedophile, I said, I'm your guy. I'll come in and I'll do the day's work. The reason for that is because I just played a gay pedophile on Shameless. And I just, that's a groove in the record that I didn't want to create. I don't mind doing a lot of crazy things, but I don't like to do too many of them in a row. Kind of separate it out. But yeah, the character on Ned on Shameless is definitely shameless, and I can't. My kids can't see that. I don't let them.
That's not one they can watch.
I don't let them watch it. There was one scene in Shameless that I thought was pretty tame enough for them to see, and I said, you guys can see this one scene, and it was a scene in a store where I was eating a strawberry, and I was asking my young paramour to rob my house for me, and so I said, kids, you can see this, and because they'd heard about it at school, their friends' parents talk about it and all that, so I showed them this scene, and it was fine. It was completely tame. The only problem was that the very next scene, it cut right to something that was completely and absolutely, totally inappropriate for my kids to see. And there was nothing for me to do, and I was grabbing for the remote control, fumbling with it, trying to turn the thing off so that they wouldn't see the next scene after that. But I guess kids are sophisticated these days anyway, and it probably didn't scar them for life.
I hope not. I hope not. I want to talk a little bit about L.A. Law in a moment, and I'll tell you why, but one of the funniest things I've ever seen you do, I think, was on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Was that a lot of fun to do that show?
It was. What could be better than working one-on-one with Larry David in an unscripted show where you just get to make it up as it goes along? I mean, that to me is, a real highlight in my career, because as an actor who was bred on improvisation, we just don't get a chance to do it that much on film, particularly with shows like Mad Men that are scripted right down to the comma. But then to be able to loosen up and do something like Curb, where it's anything goes, basically, and you're making it up as you go along, that was a tremendous experience for me. Yeah.
Well, Larry and the others, I mean, they get to do that on a regular basis, but I guess the guest stars like yourself, is that intimidating at all to come into that environment, knowing they know what they're doing, and I've got to I've got to hit the ground running here.
I never felt intimidated by it. I was excited by it. I felt like, oh, here's a chance where they get to take the leash off, and I get to do whatever I want. And I didn't feel, I never felt an intimidation feeling with that. I just felt blessed to be able to do it.
With Mad Men, you've got a show that's won the drama series 4 times. Only a handful of shows have ever done that, and you're on there now. And one of the other ones to do that was L.A. Law, winning 4 times. Can you go back to the very beginning when you first heard about the project of L.A. Law, and what your thoughts were when you first wanted to go up for the role for Michael?
Well, it's curious. I didn't want to go up for the role of Michael, in fact, on that show. I was TV averse at the time, and I didn't own a television. I didn't watch television. I had never seen Hill Street Blues, which was Stephen Bochco's other show. And they sent that script over to me, and they said, you really have to look at this because it's great, and they want you to do. They didn't offer me the role. They said they were interested in me for this role in this TV series, and I just took it and I threw it down on my desk, and I said, I'm not going to read that because it's a TV series. I don't want to do it. And it sat there for a few weeks, and my agent kept calling me and saying, have you read the L.A. Law script yet? Have you? And I said, well, I'll get to it one of these days. And I said, well, it's coming up pretty soon, and really I didn't want to do it. And then I had a dinner party one night, and a friend of mine was sitting there, and he saw the L.A. Law script sitting on my desk, and he said, oh my God, you have the L.A. Law script? And I said, well, yeah, my agent sent that to me. He said, well, you got to read that. That's supposed to be the greatest thing that's ever happened in television, And I said, yeah, well, I'm not really interested in doing a TV project. And he said, well, you got to read it anyway. So I promised him I would read it, and I did. And it ends up, to this day, being the best script I have ever read. And based upon that reading, I said, well, I have to call my agent. I have to investigate this because this was such a good script. And though I didn't want to do television, I said, well, this is such a good script and such a good character that I'll do the pilot, but more than likely, as television shows go, it will go away. I'll do the pilot in a couple of episodes, and then we'll be canceled, and I'll go on to do other things. And well, such is life, It ended up becoming this huge phenomenon, and I ended up doing it for the whole 5 years of the first contract. But I actually turned it down in the first iteration. The first time I was offered the role, I said no. And then my wife at the time, she said, you got to do it. You have to call Stephen Bochco back and see if you can get back into it. This is after I had initially turned it down.
Once you first got together with that just incredible cast, and you'd done, say, a handful of episodes, how deep into the project did you realize, hey, this is something really, really special here?
In truth, that moment never happened. When we're working on the set and we're doing a show, we're so involved in the day-to-day process of doing the show that it's hard for us to stand outside and look in and from the outside and have an objective idea of what it is that we're doing. I mean, we did start to get award nominations, and it was obvious that people responded to the show and liked it. But we were so involved in the interior of the show that it never really became apparent to us that we were doing anything that special. That's just the way I think television goes. I mean, we take a brown bag lunch to work. We go to work. We do our job. We get in the car. We fight traffic on the way home, and then we deal with the kids. I mean, it's like any other job. And that moment of aha, we're doing something amazing, is really reserved, I think, for people other than the actors. At least in my case, that never happened with me.
And when you all got together for that first Emmy Awards ceremony coming off the first season of L.A. Law, can you just go back to that night and just a true celebration of the show and winning drama series and so forth?
Well, it was a different era, too. The whole celebrity celebration era of all of the tabloid television shows and all that hadn't really happened yet. There wasn't as much of a sensation around the Emmys as there is today, or the Golden Globes. The Emmys back, the first time that we won, were being shown on an unknown network, a brand new network called Fox that nobody saw. It had a tiny viewership. Um, Fox bought the Emmys for the first couple of years in order to establish their brand. So it was not a big deal back then. There weren't the big parties there are now after the Emmys. There weren't the big parties before the Emmys. The Emmys were at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, and you showed up there, and there weren't a lot of photographers around, and you went in and had your thing, and if you won an Emmy, great. If you didn't, you went home. Um, I think, this whole thing called swag has come up in the interim while I've taken time off to raise my family, and this whole thing where when we were nominated for Emmys, we would go and we would get a little envelope that said, "Thank you for coming." That was it. And now I understand that they get like private jet trips and vacations in Bali and cars and watches and stuff like that. And that never happened in my day. It was, you got a note that said, "Thanks for coming."
Well, you had 3 Golden Globe nominations for your role, but for some reason, so many in the cast got nominated at the Emmys, but you did not. Did that ever bother you?
No, I know. I was not a big awards guy. In any case, I never have been. There were the first couple of years. I never put myself up for an Emmy. The show may have, but to this day, I guess Mad Men put me up for this one. I'm not much of an award guy. I suppose it would be a good thing because it probably means that you get paid more the next time out, and so as the tuition goes up for my kids' school, it'll probably be a good thing to have an award nomination because that would help with paying for tuition. But as far as the award thing goes itself, it's never been high on my list.
Well, just knowing that, and I think you've got a really, really good shot of a nomination here for Mad Men. They've only put forward 2 guest actors from the show, so that's a really good sign that they really like your work. But just to be recognized by those actors within the Academy, your own peers, I think is a real symbol of where you are right now.
Well, that would be, of course, that would be great. And, it was a different, like back then in LA Law Days, it was a different era. The awards thing was a whole different thing, and now it's just it's exploded into something that would be hard to have predicted in those days. And the whole celebrity thing has exploded, and the paparazzi thing has exploded. And I always say to my wife, it's a good thing that we're not working that much, because what if we couldn't leave our house, and what if there were people parked outside the house and we couldn't go anywhere? That would be an issue.
Oh, it's so different now. Let me ask you one final question. In your career, you've worked with so many incredible writers. We've talked about several of them: Matt Weiner now, John Wells on Shameless, David E. Kelley, Stephen Bochco. On these really exceptional writers, what is it about them that attracts you and really makes their work stand out for you?
Um, it's hard to quantify and what really makes a great writer. Why? These guys are obviously geniuses in what they do. I pinch myself every day about being on Mad Men. A year or so ago, I turned to Lisa, to my wife, and I said, I think I'm going to go back to work now. I took a bunch of years off to raise my kids, and I think I'm ready to to be a regular on a show again or something. And in my mind, I thought that meant maybe being a dad on an ABC Family. I don't know what but to end up here on Mad Men to do this, oh my God, it's like I never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that this is where I would be working. And yet here I am. So and as far as what makes a great writer, I think they have an ear for what's real and what's true and what ultimately rings true for an audience. And truth is really what makes great television. And by the way, television today is on fire. If you're an actor and you're looking to do great work today, I think it's happening right here in this sweet spot of cable television. At least it is to me.
Well, you can tell that just by, think about 10, 15 years ago, the types of people that are on TV right now that are basically film stars, everybody from Kevin Spacey to Glenn Close to William H. Macy, who you've worked with. I mean, they're finding, I think, that TV scripts are in many ways better than the movie scripts they're seeing.
I think that's true. And, if I go back to the L.A. Law pilot script, that to this day, of all scripts I have ever read, film or television, that remains the greatest script I've ever read. And no one has yet to write one that blew my mind as much.
Well, Harry, we're so glad to have you back on TV, especially on shows like these that are very quality, and you're giving great performances. And hopefully we can see you on that Emmy ballot in late July when they make those nomination announcements.
Well, that would be beyond my wildest dreams, I can tell you that. And if you're glad to have me back on TV, let me just tell you that for me, multiply that times a million. That's how glad I am to be in shows like this. So,
well, thanks for joining us today. Have a great summer.
my pleasure. You too.